Chapter 1. The most dangerous sicknesses are those that make us believe we are well. Proverb 42, the Book of Shhh. It has been 64 years since the President and the Consortium identified love as a disease, and 43 since the scientists perfected a cure. Everyone else in my family has had the procedure already. My older sister Rachel has been disease-free for 9 years now. She's been safe from love for so long, she says she can't even remember its symptoms. I'm scheduled to have my procedure in exactly 95 days on September 3rd. My birthday. Many people are afraid of the procedure. Some people even resist. But I'm not afraid. I can't wait. I would have it done tomorrow if I could, but you have to be at least 18, sometimes a little older, before the scientists will cure you. Otherwise the procedure won't work correctly. People end up with brain damage, partial paralysis, blindness, or worse. I don't like to think that I'm still walking around with the disease running through my blood. Sometimes I swear I can feel it writhing in my veins like something spoiled, like sour milk. It makes me feel dirty. It reminds me of children throwing tantrums. It reminds me of resistance, of diseased girls dragging their nails on the pavement, tearing out their hair, their mouths dripping spit. And of course it reminds me of my mother. After the procedure I will be happy and safe forever. That's what everybody says, the scientists and my sister and Aunt Carol. I will have the procedure, and then I'll be paired with a boy the evaluators choose for me. In a few years we'll get married. Recently I've started having dreams about my wedding. In them I'm standing under a white canopy with flowers in my hair. I'm holding hands with someone, but whenever I turn to look at him his face blurs like a camera losing focus, and I can't make out any features. But his hands are cool and dry, and my heart is beating steadily in my chest, and in my dream I know it will always beat out that same rhythm, not skip or jump or swirl or go faster, just whoomp 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 until I'm dead. Safe and free from pain. Things weren't always as good as they are now. In school we learned that in the old days, the dark days, people didn't realize how deadly a disease love was. For a long time they even viewed it as a good thing, something to be celebrated and pursued. Of course that's one of the reasons it's so dangerous. It affects your mind so that you cannot think clearly, or make rational decisions about your own well-being. That's symptom number 12, listed in the Amor Deliria Nervosa section of the 12th edition of the Safety, Health and Happiness Handbook, or the Book of Shhh as we call it. Instead people back then named other diseases: stress, heart disease, anxiety, depression, hypertension, insomnia, bipolar disorder, never realizing that these were in fact only symptoms that in the majority of cases could be traced back to the effects of Amor Deliria Nervosa. Of course we aren't yet totally free from the deliria in the United States. Until the procedure has been perfected, until it has been made safe for the under 18s, we will never be totally protected. It still moves around us with invisible sweeping tentacles, choking us. I've seen countless uncureds dragged to their procedures, so racked and ravaged by love that they would rather tear their eyes out, or try to impale themselves on the barbed wire fences outside of the laboratories than be without it. Several years ago on the day of her procedure, one girl managed to slip from her restraints and find her way to the laboratory roof. She dropped quickly without screaming. For days afterward, they broadcast the image of the dead girl's face on television to remind us of the dangers of the deliria. Her eyes were open and her neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, but from the way her cheek was resting against the pavement you might otherwise think she had lain down to take a nap. Surprisingly, there was very little blood, just a small dark trickle at the corners of her mouth. 95 days, and then I'll be safe. I'm nervous, of course. I wonder whether the procedure will hurt. I want to get it over with. It's hard to be patient. It's hard not to be afraid while I'm still uncured, though so far the deliria hasn't touched me yet. Still, I worry. They say that in the old days, love drove people to madness. That's bad enough. The Book of Shhh also tells stories of those who died because of love lost or never found, which is what terrifies me the most. The deadliest of all deadly things, it kills you both when you have it and when you don't. Chapter 2. We must be constantly on guard against the disease. The health of our nation, our people, our families, and our minds depends on constant vigilance. Basic health measures, the Safety, Health and Happiness Handbook 12th edition. The smell of oranges has always reminded me of funerals. On the morning of my evaluation it is the smell that wakes me up. I look at the clock on the bedside table. It's 6 o'clock. The light is gray, the sunlight just strengthening along the walls of the bedroom I share with both of my cousin Marcia's children. Grace, the younger one, is crouched on her twin bed already dressed, watching me. She has a whole orange in one hand. She is trying to gnaw on it, like an apple, with her little kid teeth. My stomach twists and I have to close my eyes again to keep from remembering the hot scratchy dress I was forced to wear when my mother died. To keep from remembering the murmur of voices, a large rough hand passing me orange after orange to suck on so I would stay quiet. At the funeral I ate 4 oranges, section by section, and when I was left with only a pile of peelings heaped on my lap I began to suck on those, the bitter taste of the pith helping to keep the tears away. I open my eyes and Grace leans forward, the orange cupped in her outstretched palm. No, Gracie. I push off my covers and stand up. My stomach is clenching and unclenching like a fist. And you're not supposed to eat the peel, you know. She continues blinking up at me with her big gray eyes, not saying anything. I sigh and sit down next to her. Here, I say, and show her how to peel the orange using her nail, unwinding bright orange curls and dropping them in her lap, the whole time trying to hold my breath against the smell. She watches me in silence. When I'm finished she holds the orange, now unpeeled, in both hands, as though it's a glass ball, and she's worried about breaking it. I nudge her. Go ahead. Eat now. She just stares at it, and I sigh, and begin separating the sections for her, one by one. As I do I whisper as gently as possible, you know, the others would be nicer to you if you would speak once in a while. She doesn't respond. Not that I really expect her to. My Aunt Carol hasn't heard her say a word in the whole 6 years and 3 months of Grace's life, not a single syllable. Carol thinks there's something wrong with her brain, but so far the doctors haven't found it. She's as dumb as a rock, Carol said matter-of-factly just the other day, watching Grace turn a bright-colored block over and over in her hands, as though it was beautiful and miraculous, as though she expected it to turn suddenly into something else. I stand up and go toward the window, moving away from Grace and her big staring eyes and thin, quick fingers. I feel sorry for her. Marcia, Grace's mother, is dead now. She always said she never wanted children in the first place. That's one of the downsides of the procedure. In the absence of deliria nervosa, some people find parenting distasteful. Thankfully, cases of full-blown detachment where a mother or father is unable to bond normally, dutifully and responsibly with his or her children, and winds up drowning them or sitting on their windpipes or beating them to death when they cry, are few. But 2 was the number of children the evaluators decided on for Marcia. At the time it seemed like a good choice. Her family had earned high stabilization marks in the annual review. Her husband, a scientist, was well respected. They lived in an enormous house on Winter Street. Marcia cooked every meal from scratch, and taught piano lessons in her spare time to keep busy. But of course when Marcia's husband was suspected of being a sympathizer, everything changed. Marcia and her children, Jenny and Grace, had to move back with Marcia's mother, my Aunt Carol, and people whispered and pointed at them everywhere they went. Grace wouldn't remember that, of course. I'd be surprised if she has any memories of her parents at all. Marcia's husband disappeared before his trial could begin. It's probably a good thing he did. The trials are mostly for show. Sympathizers are almost always executed. If not, they're locked away in the crypts to serve 3 life sentences, back to back. Marcia knew that, of course. Aunt Carol thinks that's the reason her heart gave out only a few months after her husband's disappearance, when she was indicted in his place. A day after she got served the paper, she was walking down the street, and bam! Heart attack. Hearts are fragile things. That's why you have to be so careful. It will be hot today, I can tell. It's already hot in the bedroom, and when I crack the window to sweep out the smell of orange, the air outside feels as thick and heavy as a tongue. I suck in deeply, inhaling the clean smell of seaweed and damp wood, listening to the distant cries of the seagulls as they circle endlessly, somewhere beyond the low, gray, sloping buildings, over the bay. Outside, a car engine guns to life. The sound startles me, and I jump. Nervous about your evaluation. I turn around. My Aunt Carol is standing in the doorway, her hands folded. No, I say, though this is a lie. She smiles just barely, a brief flitting thing. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Take your shower, and then I'll help you with your hair. We can review your answers on the way. Okay. My aunt continues to stare at me. I squirm, digging my nails into the windowsill behind me. I've always hated being looked at. Of course, I'll have to get used to it. During the exam there will be 4 evaluators staring at me for close to 2 hours. I'll be wearing a flimsy plastic gown, semi-translucent like the kind you get in hospitals, so that they can see my body. A 7 or an 8, I would say, my aunt says, puckering her lips. It's a decent score, and I'd be happy with it. Though you won't get more than a 6 if you don't get cleaned up. Senior year is almost over, and the evaluation is the final test I will take. For the past 4 months I've had all my various board exams: math, science, oral and written proficiency, sociology and psychology, and photography, a specialty elective, and I should be getting my scores sometime in the next few weeks. I'm pretty sure I did well enough to get assigned to a college. I've always been a decent student. The academic assessors will analyze my strengths and weaknesses, and then assign me to a school and a major. The evaluation is the last step, so I can get paired. In the coming months the evaluators will send me a list of 4 or 5 approved matches. One of them will become my husband after I graduate college, assuming I pass all my boards. Girls who don't pass get paired and married right out of high school. The evaluators will do their best to match me with people who received a similar score in the evaluations. As much as possible, they try to avoid any huge disparities in intelligence, temperament, social background, and age. Of course, you do hear occasional horror stories, cases where a poor 18-year-old girl is given to a wealthy 80-year-old man. The stairs let out their awful moaning, and Grace's sister Jenny appears. She is 9 and tall for her age, but very thin, all angles and elbows, her chest caving in like a warped sheet pan. It's terrible to say, but I don't like her very much. She has the same pinched look as her mother did. She joins my aunt in the doorway and stares at me. I am only 5'2" and Jenny is amazingly, just a few inches shorter than I am now. It's silly to feel self-conscious in front of my aunt and cousins, but a hot, crawling itch begins to work its way up my arms. I know they're all worried about my performance at the evaluation. It's critical that I get paired with someone good. Jenny and Grace are years away from their procedures. If I marry well, in a few years it will mean extra money for the family. It might also make the whispers go away, sing-song snatches that 4 years after the scandal still seem to follow us wherever we go, like the sound of rustling leaves carried on the wind. Sympathizer. 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 It's only slightly better than the other word that followed me for years after my mom's death, a snake-like hiss undulating, leaving its trail of poison. Suicide. A sideways word, a word that people whisper and mutter and cough, a word that must be squeezed out behind cupped palms or murmured behind closed doors. It was only in my dreams that I heard the word shouted, screamed. I take a deep breath, then duck down to pull the plastic bin from under my bed so that my aunt won't see I'm shaking. Is Lena getting married today? Jenny asks my aunt. Her voice has always reminded me of bees droning flatly in the heat. Don't be stupid, my aunt says, but without irritation. You know she can't marry until she's cured. I take my towel from the bin and straighten up. That word marry makes my mouth go dry. Everyone marries as soon as they are done with their education. It's the way things are. Marriage is order and stability, the mark of a healthy society. See the Book of SHHH, Fundamentals of Society, p. 114. But the God of it still makes my heart flutter frantically, like an insect behind glass. I've never touched a boy, of course physical contact between uncureds of opposite sex is forbidden. Honestly, I've never even talked to a boy for longer than 5 minutes, unless you count my cousins and uncle and Andrew Marcus, who helps my uncle at the stop and save, and is always picking his nose and wiping his snot on the underside of the canned vegetables. And if I don't pass my boards, please God, let me pass them. I'll have my wedding as soon as I'm cured in less than 3 months. Which means I'll have my wedding night. The smell of oranges is still strong, and my stomach does another swoop. I bury my face in my towel and inhale, willing myself not to be sick. From downstairs there is the clatter of dishes. My aunt sighs and checks her watch. We have to leave in less than an hour, she says. You'd better get moving. Chapter 3. Lord, help us root our feet to the earth. And our eyes to the road. And always remember the fallen angels. Who, attempting to soar, were seared instead by the sun and, wings melting, came crashing back to the sea. Lord, help root my eyes to the earth. And stay my eyes to the road. So I may never stumble. Psalm 24. From Prayer and Study, the Book of SHHH. My aunt insists on walking me down to the laboratories, which, like all the government offices, are lumped together along the wharves, a string of bright white buildings, glistening like teeth over the slurping mouth of the ocean. When I was little and had just moved in with her, she used to walk me to school every day. My mother, sister, and I had lived closer to the border, and I was amazed and terrified by all the winding, darkened streets, which smelled like garbage and old fish. I always wished for my aunt to hold my hand, but she never did, and I had balled my hands into fists and followed the hypnotic swish of her corduroy pants, dreading the moment that street Anne's Academy for Girls would rise up over the crest of the final hill, the dark stone building lined with fissures and cracks like the weather-beaten face of one of the industrial fishermen who work along the docks. It's amazing how things change. I'd been terrified of the streets of Portland then, and reluctant to leave my aunt's side. Now I know them so well I could follow their dips and curves with my eyes closed, and today I want nothing more than to be alone. I can smell the ocean though it's concealed from view by the twisting undulations of the streets, and it relaxes me. The salt blowing off the sea makes the air feel textured and heavy. Remember, she is saying for the 1,000th time, they want to know about your personality, yes, but the more generalized your answers the better chance you have of being considered for a variety of positions. My aunt has always talked about marriage with words straight out of the Book of SHHH, words like duty, responsibility, and perseverance. Got it, I say. A bus barrels past us. The crest for street Anne's Academy is stenciled along its side and I duck my head quickly, imagining Cara McNamara or Hillary Packer staring out the dirt-encrusted windows, giggling and pointing at me. Everyone knows I am having my evaluation today. Only 4 are offered throughout the year, and slots are determined well in advance. The makeup Aunt Carol insisted I wear makes my skin feel coated and slick. In the bathroom mirror at home, I looked like a fish, especially with my hair all pinned with metal bobby pins and clips, a fish with a bunch of metal hooks sticking in my head. I don't like makeup, have never been interested in clothes or lip gloss. My best friend, Hannah, thinks I'm crazy, but of course she would. She's absolutely gorgeous even when she just twists her blonde hair into a messy knot on the top of her head. She looks as though she's just had it styled. I'm not ugly, but I'm not pretty either. Everything is in between. I have eyes that aren't green or brown, but a muddle. I'm not thin, but I'm not fat, either. The only thing you could definitely say about me is this: I'm short. If they ask you, God forbid, about your cousins, remember to say that you didn't know them well. I'm only half listening. It's hot, too hot for June, and sweat is pricking up already on my lower back and in my armpits even though I slathered on deodorant this morning. To our right is Casco Bay, which is hemmed in by Peaks Island and Great Diamond Island, where the lookout towers are. Beyond that is open ocean, and beyond that, all the crumbling countries and cities ruined by the disease. Lena. Are you even listening to me? Carol puts a hand on my arm and spins me in her direction. Blue, I parrot back at her. Blue is my favorite color. Or green. Black is too morbid. Red will set them on edge. Pink is too juvenile. Orange is freakish. And the things you like to do in your free time. I gently slip away from her grasp. We've gone over this already. This is important, Lena. Possibly the most important day of your whole life. I sigh. Ahead of me, the gates that bar the government lab swing open slowly with a mechanized whine. There is already a double line forming on one side, the girls, and 50 feet away, at a second entrance, the boys. I squint against the sun, trying to locate people I know, but the ocean has dazzled me and my vision is clouded by floating black spots. Lena. My aunt prompts me. I take a deep breath and launch into the spiel we've rehearsed a billion times. I like to work on the school paper. I'm interested in photography because I like the way it captures and preserves a single moment of time. I enjoy hanging out with my friends and attending concerts at Deering Oaks Park. I like to run and was a co-captain of the cross-country team for 2 years. I hold the school record in the 5K event. I often babysit the younger members of my family, and I really like children. You're making a face, my aunt says. I love children, I repeat, plastering a smile on my face. The truth is, I don't like very many children except for Gracie. They're so bumpy and loud all the time, and they're always grabbing things and dribbling and wetting themselves. But I know I'll have to have children of my own someday. Better, Carol says. Go on. I finish. My favorite subjects are math and history, and she nods satisfied. Lena. I turn around. Hannah is just climbing out of her parents' car, her blonde hair flying in wisps and waves around her face, her semi-sheer tunic slipping off one tan shoulder. All the girls and boys lining up to enter the labs have turned to watch her. Hannah has that kind of power over people. Lena. Wait. Hannah continues barreling down the street, waving at me frantically. Behind her, the car begins a slow revolution back and forth in the narrow drive until it is facing the opposite direction. Hannah's parents' car is as sleek and dark as a panther. The few times we've driven around in it together, I've felt like a princess. Hardly anyone has cars anymore, and even fewer have cars that actually drive. Oil is strictly rationed and extremely expensive. Some middle-class people keep cars mounted in front of their houses like statues, frigid and unused, the tires spotless and unworn. Hi Carol, Hannah says breathlessly, catching up to us. A magazine pops out of her half-open bag, and she stoops to retrieve it. It's one of the government publications, Home and Family, and in response to my raised eyebrows she makes a face. Mom made me bring it. She said I should read it while I'm waiting for my evaluation. She said it will give the right impression. Hannah sticks her finger down her throat and mimes gagging. Hannah, my aunt whispers fiercely. The anxiety in her voice makes my heart skip. Carol hardly ever loses her temper, even for a minute. She whips her head in both directions as though expecting to find regulators or evaluators lurking in the bright morning street. Don't worry. They're not spying on us. Hannah turns her back to my aunt and mouths to me, yet. Then she grins. In front of us, the double line of girls and boys is growing longer, extending into the street even as the glass-fronted doors of the labs swoosh open and several nurses appear, carrying clipboards and begin to usher people into the waiting rooms. My aunt rests one hand on my elbow lightly, quick as a bird. You'd better get online, she says. Her voice is back to normal. I wish some of her calmness would rub off on me. And Lena. Yeah. I don't feel very well. The labs look far away, so white I can hardly stand to look at them, the pavement shimmering hot in front of us. The words most important day of your life keep repeating in my head. The sun feels like a giant spotlight. Good luck. My aunt does her 1 millisecond smile. Thanks. I kind of wish Carol would say something else, something like, I'm sure you'll do great, or try not to worry, but she just stands there, blinking, her face composed and unreadable as always. Don't worry, Mrs. Tittle. Hannah winks at me. I'll make sure she doesn't screw up too badly. Promise. All my nervousness dissipates. Hannah is so relaxed about the whole thing, so nonchalant and normal. Hannah and I go down toward the labs together. Hannah is almost 5'9". When I walk next to her, I have to do a half skip every other step to keep up with her, and I wind up feeling like a duck bobbing up and down in the water. Today I don't mind though. I'm glad she's with me. I'd be a complete wreck otherwise. God, she says as we get close to the lines. Your aunt takes this whole thing pretty seriously, huh? Well, it is serious. We join the back of the line. I see a few people I recognize, some girls I know vaguely from school. Some guys I've seen playing soccer behind Spencer Prep, one of the boys' schools. A boy looks my way and sees me staring. He raises his eyebrows and I drop my eyes quickly, my face going hot all at once and a nervous itch working in my stomach. You'll be paired in less than 3 months, I tell myself, but the words don't mean anything and seem ridiculous, like one of the Mad Libs games we played as children that always resulted in nonsensical statements. I want banana for speedboat. Give my wet shoe to your blistering cupcake. Yeah, I know. Trust me, I've read the book of SHHH as much as anyone. Hannah pushes her sunglasses up onto her forehead and bats her eyelashes at me, making her voice super sweet. Evaluation day is the exciting rite of passage that prepares you for a future of happiness, stability, and partnership. She drops her sunglasses back down on her nose and makes a face. You don't believe it. I lower my voice to a whisper. Hannah has been strange recently. She was always different from other people, more outspoken, more independent, more fearless. It's one of the reasons I first wanted to be her friend. I've always been shy and afraid that I'll say or do the wrong thing. Hannah is the opposite. But lately it's been more than that. She stopped caring about school for one thing, and has been called to the principal's office several times for talking back to the teachers. And sometimes in the middle of talking she'll stop, just shut her mouth as though she's run up against a barrier. Other times I'll catch her staring out at the ocean as though she's thinking of swimming away. Looking at her now, at her clear gray eyes and her mouth as thin and taut as a bowstring, I feel a tug of fear. I think of my mother floundering for a second in the air before dropping like a stone into the ocean. I think about the face of the girl who dropped from the laboratory roof all those years ago, her cheek turned against the pavement. I will away gods of the illness. Hannah isn't sick. She can't be. I would know. If they really want us to be happy, they'd let us pick ourselves, Hannah grumbles. Hannah, I say sharply. Criticizing the system is the worst offense there is. Take it back. She holds up her hands. All right, all right. I take it back. You know it doesn't work. Look how it was in the old days. Chaos all the time, fighting and war. People were miserable. I said, I take it back. She smiles at me, but I'm still mad, and I look away. Besides, I go on, they do give us a choice. Usually the evaluators generate a list of 4 or 5 approved matches, and you are allowed to pick among them. This way, everyone is happy. In all the years that the procedure has been administered and the marriages arranged, there have been fewer than a dozen divorces in Maine, less than 1,000 in the entire United States, and in almost all those cases either the husband or wife was suspected of being a sympathizer, and divorce was necessary and approved by the state. A limited choice, she corrects me. We get to choose from the people who have been chosen for us. Every choice is limited, I snap. That's life. She opens her mouth as though she's going to respond, but instead she just starts to laugh. Then she reaches down and squeezes my hand, 2 quick pumps and then 2 long ones. It's our old sign, a habit we developed in the 2nd grade when one of us was scared or upset, a way of saying, I'm here, don't worry. Okay, okay. Don't get defensive. I love the evaluations, okay. Long live evaluation day. That's better, I say, but I'm still feeling anxious and annoyed. The line shuffles slowly forward. We pass the iron gates with their complicated crown of barbed wire and enter the long driveway that leads to the various lab complexes. We are headed for Building 6C. The boys go to 6B, and the lines begin to curve away from each other. As we move closer to the front of the line, we get a blast of air conditioning every time the glass doors slide open and then hum shut. It feels amazing, like being momentarily dipped head to toe in a thin sheet of ice, popsicle style, and I turn around and lift my ponytail away from my neck, wishing it weren't so damn hot. We don't have air conditioning at home, just tall, gawky fans that are always sputtering out in the middle of the night. And most of the time Carol won't even let us use those. They suck up too much electricity, she says, and we don't have any to spare. At last there are only a few people in front of us. A nurse comes out of the building, carrying a stack of clipboards and a handful of pens, and begins distributing them along the line. Please make sure to fill out all required information, she says, including your medical and family history. My heart begins to work its way up into my throat. The neatly numbered boxes on the page, last name, first name, middle initial, current address, age, collapse together. I'm glad Hannah is in front of me. She begins filling out the forms quickly, resting the clipboard on her forearm, her pen skating over the paper. Next. The doors whoosh open again, and a second nurse appears and gestures for Hannah to come inside. In the dark coolness beyond her, I can see a bright white waiting room with a green carpet. Good luck, I say to Hannah. She turns and gives me a quick smile. But I can tell she is nervous, finally. There is a fine crease between her eyebrows, and she is chewing on the corner of her lip. She starts to enter the lab and then turns abruptly and walks back to me, her face wild and unfamiliar looking, grabbing me with both shoulders, putting her mouth directly to my ear. I'm so startled I drop my clipboard. You know you can't be happy unless you're unhappy sometimes, right? She whispers, and her voice is hoarse, as though she's just been crying. What? Her nails are digging into my shoulders, and at that moment I'm terrified of her. You can't be really happy unless you're unhappy sometimes. You know that, right? Before I can respond, she releases me, and as she pulls away, her face is as serene and beautiful and composed as ever. She bends down to scoop up my clipboard, which she passes to me smiling. Then she turns around and is gone behind the glass doors, which open and close behind her as smoothly as the surface of water, sucking closed over something that is sinking. Chapter 4. The devil stole into the Garden of Eden. He carried with him the disease amor deliria nervosa. In the form of a seed. It grew and flowered into a magnificent apple tree, which bore apples as bright as blood. From Genesis, A Complete History of the World and the Known Universe, by Stephen Horace, Ph.D., Harvard University. By the time the nurse admits me into the waiting room, Hannah is gone, vanished down one of the antiseptic white hallways and whisked behind one of the dozens of identical white doors, although there are about a half dozen other girls milling around waiting. One girl is sitting in a chair, hunched over her clipboard, scribbling and crossing out her answers and then rescribbling. Another girl is frantically asking a nurse about the difference between chronic medical conditions and pre-existing medical conditions. She looks like she's on the verge of having some kind of fit. A vein is standing out on her forehead and her voice is rising hysterically, and I wonder whether she's going to list a tendency toward excessive anxiety on her sheet. It's not funny, but I feel like laughing. I bring my hand to my face, snorting into my palm. I tend to get giggly when I'm extremely nervous. During tests at school, I'm always getting in trouble for laughing. I wonder if I should have marked that down. A nurse takes my clipboard from me and flips through the pages, checking to see that I haven't left any answers blank. Lena Haloway. She says in the bright, clipped voice that all nurses seem to share, like it's part of their medical training. I say, and then quickly correct myself. My aunt has told me that the evaluators will expect a certain degree of formality. Yes. That's me. It's still strange to hear my real name, Haloway, and a dull feeling settles at the bottom of my stomach. For the past decade I've gone by my aunt's name, Tittle. Even though it's a pretty stupid last name, Hannah once said it reminded her of a little kid word for peeing. At least it isn't associated with my mother and father. At least the Tittles are a real family. The Haloways are nothing but a memory. But for official purposes I have to use my birth name. Follow me. The nurse gestures down one of the hallways, and I follow the neat tick-tock of her heels down the linoleum. The halls are blindingly bright. The butterflies are working their way up from my stomach into my head, making me feel dizzy, and I try to calm myself by imagining the ocean outside, its ragged breathing, the seagulls turning pinwheels in the sky. It will be over soon, I tell myself. It will be over soon, and then you'll go home, and you'll never have to think about the evaluation again. The hallway seems to go on forever. Up ahead a door opens and shuts, and a moment later, as we turn a corner, a girl brushes past us. Her face is red, and she's obviously been crying. She must be done with her evaluation already. I recognize her vaguely as one of the first girls admitted. I can't help but feel sorry for her. Evaluations typically last anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, but it's common wisdom that the longer the evaluators keep you, the better you're doing. Of course, that isn't always true. 2 years ago, Marcy Davies was famously in and out of the lab in 45 minutes, and she scored a perfect 10. And last year, Corey Wynn scored an all-time record for longest evaluation, 3.5 hours, and still received only a 3. There's a system behind the evaluations, obviously, but there's always a degree of randomness to them too. Sometimes it seems the whole process is designed to be as intimidating and confusing as possible. I have a sudden fantasy of running through these clean, sterile hallways, kicking in all the doors. Then immediately, I feel guilty. This is the worst of all possible times to be having doubts about the evaluations, and I mentally curse Hannah. This is her fault for saying those things to me outside. You can't be happy unless you're unhappy sometimes. A limited choice. We get to choose from the people who have been chosen for us. I'm glad the choice is made for us. I'm glad I don't have to choose, but more than that, I'm glad I don't have to make someone else choose me. It would be okay for Hannah, of course, if things were still the way they were in the old days. Hannah with her golden, halo hair and bright gray eyes and perfect straight teeth, and her laugh that makes everyone in a 2-mile radius whip around and look at her and laugh too. Even clumsiness looks good on Hannah. It makes you want to reach out a hand to help her or scoop up her books. When I trip on my own feet or spill coffee down the front of my shirt, people look away. You can almost see them thinking, what a mess. And whenever I'm around strangers, my mind goes fuzzy and damp and gray, like streets starting to thaw after a hard snow, unlike Hannah, who always knows just what to say. No guy in his right mind would ever choose me when there are people like Hannah in the world. It would be like settling for a stale cookie when what you really want is a big bowl of ice cream, whipped cream and cherries and chocolate sprinkles included. So I'll be happy to receive my neat, printed sheet of approved matches. At least it means I'll end up with somebody. It won't matter if nobody ever thinks I'm pretty, although sometimes I wish just for a second that somebody would. It wouldn't matter if I had one eye. In here. The nurse stops, finally, outside a door that looks identical to all the others. You can leave your clothing and things in the antechamber. Please put on the gown that is provided for you, with the opening to the back. Feel free to take a moment, have some water, do some meditation. I imagine hundreds and hundreds of girls sitting cross-legged on the floor, hands cupped on their knees, chanting Om, and have to stifle another wild urge to laugh. Please be aware, however, that the longer you take to prepare, the less time your evaluators will have to get to know you. She smiles tightly. Everything about her is tight, her skin, her eyes, her lab coat. She is looking straight at me, but I have the impression that she isn't really focusing, that in her mind she's already tick-tocking her way back to the waiting room, ready to bring yet another girl down yet another hallway, and give her this same spiel. I feel very lonely surrounded by these thick walls that muffle all sounds, insulated from the sun and the wind and the heat, all of it perfect and unnatural. When you're ready, go on through the blue door. The evaluators will be waiting for you in the lab. After the nurse clicks away, I go into the antechamber, which is small and just as bright as the hallway. It looks like a regular doctor's examination room. There's an enormous piece of medical equipment squatting in the corner, emitting a series of periodic beeps, a tissue paper-covered examination table, a stinging antiseptic smell. I take off my clothes, shivering as the air conditioning makes goosebumps pop up all over my skin, the fuzz on my arm standing up a little straighter. Great. Now the evaluators will think I'm a hairy beast. I fold my clothes, including my bra, in a neat pile and slip on the gown. It's made of super sheer plastic, and as I wrap it around my body, securing it at the waist with a knot, I'm fully aware that you can still see pretty much everything, including the outline of my underwear through its fabric. Over. Soon it will be over. I take a deep breath and step through the blue door. It's even brighter in the lab, dazzlingly bright, so the evaluator's first impression of me must be of someone squinting, stepping backward, bringing her hand to her face. 4 shadows float in a canoe in front of me. Then my eyes adjust and the vision resolves into the 4 evaluators all sitting behind a long, low table. This room is very large, and totally empty except for the evaluators and in the corner, a steel surgical table that's been shoved up against one wall. Dual rows of overhead lights beat down on me, and I notice how high the ceiling is, at least 30 feet. I have a desperate urge to cross my arms over my chest to cover myself up somehow. My mouth goes dry and my mind goes as hot and blank and white as the lights. I can't remember what I'm supposed to do, what I'm supposed to say. Fortunately, one of the evaluators, a woman, speaks first. Do you have your forms? Her voice sounds friendly, but it doesn't help the fist that has closed deep in my stomach, squeezing my intestines. Oh, God, I think. I'm going to pee. I'm going to pee right here. I try to imagine what Hannah will say after this is over, when we're walking through the afternoon sunshine with the smell of salt and sun-warmed pavement heavy on the air around us. God, she'll say. That was a waste of time. All of them just sitting there staring like 4 frogs on a log. Yes. I step closer, feeling like the air has turned solid, resisting me. When I'm a few feet away from the table, I reach out and pass the evaluators my clipboard. There are 3 men and 1 woman, but I find I can't focus on their features for too long. I scan them quickly and then shuffle backward again, getting only an impression of some noses, a few dark eyes, the winking of a pair of glasses. My clipboard bobs its way down the line of evaluators. I squeeze my arms to my sides and try to appear relaxed. Behind me, an observation deck runs along the back wall, elevated about 20 feet off the ground. It is accessed through a small red door high up beyond the tiered rows of white seats that are obviously meant to hold students, doctors, interns, and junior scientists. Not only do the lab scientists perform the procedure, they do checkups afterward and often treat difficult cases of other diseases. It occurs to me that the scientists must perform the cure here in this very room. That must be what the surgical table is for. The fist of anxiety starts closing in my stomach again. For some reason, though I've often thought about what it would be like to be cured, I've never really thought about the procedure itself, the hard metal table, the lights winking above me, the tubes and the wires and the pain. Lena Haloway. Yes. That's me. Okay. Why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself? The evaluator with the glasses leans forward, spreading his hands and smiles. He has big, square white teeth that remind me of bathroom tiles. The reflection in his glasses makes it impossible to see his eyes, and I wish he would take them off. Talk to us about the things you like to do. Your interests, hobbies, favorite subjects. I launch into the speech I've prepared about photography and running and spending time with my friends, but I'm not focusing. I see the evaluators nodding in front of me, and smiles beginning to loosen their faces as they take notes, so I know I'm doing fine, but I can't even hear the words that are coming out of my mouth. I'm fixated on the metal surgical table and keep sneaking looks at it from the corner of my eye, watching it blink and shimmer in the light like the edge of a blade. And suddenly I'm thinking of my mother. My mother had remained uncured despite 3 separate procedures, and the disease had claimed her, nipped at her insides and turned her eyes hollow and her cheeks pale, had taken control of her feet and led her, inch by inch, to the edge of a sandy cliff and into the bright, thin air of the plunge beyond. Or so they tell me. I was 6 at the time. I remember only the hot pressure of her fingers on my face in the nighttime and her last whispered words to me. I love you. Remember. They cannot take it. I close my eyes quickly, overwhelmed by the thought of my mother writhing and a dozen scientists in lab coats watching, scribbling impassively on notepads. 3 separate times she was strapped to a metal table. 3 separate times a crowd of observers watched her from the deck, took note of her responses as the needles and then the lasers pierced her skin. Normally patients are anesthetized during the procedure and don't feel a thing, but my aunt had once let slip that during my mother's 3rd procedure they had refused to sedate her, thinking that the anesthesia might be interfering with her brain's response to the cure. Would you like some water? Evaluator 1, the woman gestures to a bottle of water and a glass set up on the table. She has noticed my momentary flinch, but it's okay. My personal statement is done, and I can tell by the way the evaluators are looking at me, pleased, proud, like I'm a little kid who has managed to fit all the right pegs in all the right holes, that I've done a good job. I pour myself a glass of water and take a few sips, grateful for the pause. I can feel sweat pricking up under my arms, on my scalp, and at the base of my neck, and I pray to God they can't see it. I try to keep my eyes locked on the evaluators, but there it is in my peripheral vision, grinning at me, that damn table. Okay, now, Lena. We're going to ask you some questions. We want you to answer honestly. Remember, we're trying to get to know you as a person. As opposed to what? The question pops into my mind before I can stop it. As an animal. I take a deep breath, force myself to nod and smile. Great. What are some of your favorite books? Love, War, and Interference by Christopher Malley, I answer automatically. Border by Philippa Harold. It's no use trying to keep the images away, they are rising now, a flood. That one word keeps scripting itself on my brain, as though it is being seared there. Pain. They wanted to make my mother submit to a 4th procedure. They were coming for her on the night she died, coming to bring her to the labs. But instead she had fled into the dark, winged her way into the air. Instead she had woken me with those words, I love you. Remember. They cannot take it. Which the wind seemed to carry back to me long after she had vanished, repeated on the dry trees, on the leaves, coughing and whispering in the cold gray dawn. And Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The evaluators nod, make notes. Romeo and Juliet is required reading in every freshman year health class. And why is that? Evaluator 3 asks. It's frightening, that's what I'm supposed to say. It's a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of the old world before the cure. But my throat seems to have grown swollen and tender. There is no room to squeeze the words out. They are stuck there like the burrs that cling to our clothing when we jog through the farms. And in that moment it's like I can hear the low growl of the ocean, can hear its distant, insistent murmur, can imagine its weight closing around my mother, water as heavy as stone. And what comes out is, it's beautiful. Instantly all 4 faces jerk up to look at me, like puppets connected to the same string. Beautiful. Evaluator 1 wrinkles her nose. There's a zinging, frigid tension in the air, and I realize I've made a big mistake. The evaluator with the glasses leans forward. That's an interesting word to use. Very interesting. This time when he shows his teeth, they remind me of the curved white canines of a dog. Perhaps you find suffering beautiful. Perhaps you enjoy violence. No. No, that's not it. I'm trying to think straight, but my head is full of the ocean's wordless roaring. It is growing louder, and louder by the second. And now, faintly, it's as though I can hear screaming as well, like my mother's scream is reaching me from across the span of a decade. I just mean. There's something so sad about it. I'm struggling, floundering, feeling like I'm drowning now, in the white light and the roaring. Sacrifice. I want to say something about sacrifice, but the word doesn't come. Let's move on. Evaluator 1, who sounded so sweet when she offered me the water, has lost all pretense of friendliness. She is all business now. Tell us something simple. Like your favorite color, for example. Part of my brain, the rational educated part, the logical me part, screams, blue. Say blue. But this other older thing inside of me is riding across the waves of sound, surging up with the rising noise. Gray, I blurt out. Gray. Evaluator 4 splutters back. My heart is spiraling down to my stomach. I know I've done it, I'm tanking, can practically see my numbers flipping backward. But it's too late. I'm finished. It's the roaring in my ears growing louder and louder, a stampede that makes thinking impossible. I quickly stammer out an explanation. Not gray, exactly. Right before the sun rises, there's a moment when the whole sky goes this pale nothing color, not really gray but sort of white, and I've always really liked it because it reminds me of waiting for something good to happen. But they've stopped listening. All of them are staring beyond me, heads cocked, expressions confused as though trying to make out familiar words in a foreign language. And then suddenly the roaring and the screaming surge, and I realize I haven't been imagining them all this time. People really are screaming, and there's a tumbling, rolling, drumming sound like 1,000 feet moving together. There's a third sound too running under both of those, a wordless bellowing that doesn't sound human. In my confusion, everything seems disconnected, the way it does in dreams. Evaluator 1 half rises from her chair, saying, "What the hell?" At the same time, Glasses says, "Sit down, Helen. I'll go see what's wrong." But at that second the blue door bursts open and a streaming blur of cows, actual, real, live, sweating, mooing cows come thundering into the lab. Definitely a stampede, I think, and for one weird, detached second feel proud of myself for correctly identifying the noise. Then I realize I'm being charged by a bunch of very heavy, very frightened herd animals and am about 2 seconds from getting stomped into the ground. Instantly I launch myself into the corner and wedge myself behind the surgical table, where I'm completely protected from the panicked mass of animals. I poke my head out just a little so I can still see what's going on. The evaluators are hopping up onto the table now as walls of brown and speckled cow flanks fold around them. Evaluator 1 is screaming at the top of her lungs and Glasses is yelling, "Calm down, calm down." Even though he's grabbing onto her like she's a life raft, and he's in danger of sinking. Some of the cows have wigs hanging crazily from their heads, and others are half swaddled in gowns identical to the one I'm wearing. For a second I'm sure I'm dreaming. Maybe this whole day has been a dream, and I'll wake up to discover that I'm still at home in bed on the morning of my evaluation. But then I notice the writing on the cow's flanks, not cure. Death. The words are written in sloppy ink, just above the neatly branded numbers that identify these cows as destined for the slaughterhouse. A little chill dances up my spine and everything starts clicking into place. Every couple of years the invalids, the people who live in the wilds, the unregulated land that exists between recognized cities and towns, sneak into Portland and stage some kind of protest. One year they came in at night and painted red death skulls on every single one of the known scientists' houses. Another year they managed to break into the Central Police Station, which coordinates all the patrols and guard shifts for Portland, and move all the furniture onto the roof, even the coffee machines. That was pretty funny actually, and pretty amazing, since you'd think Central would be the most secure building in Portland. People in the wilds don't see love as a disease, and they don't believe in the cure. They think it's a kind of cruelty. Thus the slogan. Now I get it. The cows are dressed up as us, the people being evaluated. Like we're all a bunch of herd animals. The cows are calming down somewhat. They're not charging anymore, and have begun to shuffle back and forth in the lab. Evaluator 1 has a clipboard in her hand, and she's swooping and swatting as the cows butt up against the table, mooing and nipping at the papers scattered across its surface. The evaluator's notes, I realize as a cow snaps up a sheet of paper and begins to rip at it with its teeth. Thank God. Maybe the cows will eat up all the notes, and the evaluators will lose track of the fact that I was completely tanking. Half concealed behind the table and safe, now from those sharp, stamping hooves, I have to admit the whole thing is kind of hilarious. That's when I hear it. Somehow above the snorting and stomping and yelling, I hear the laugh above me, low and short and musical, like someone sounding out a few notes on a piano. The observation deck. A boy is standing on the observation deck, watching the chaos below. And he's laughing. As soon as I look up, his eyes click onto my face. The breath whooshes out of my body and everything freezes for a second as though I'm looking at him through my camera lens, zoomed in all the way, the world pausing for that tiny span of time between the opening and closing of the shutter. His hair is golden brown, like leaves in autumn just as they're turning, and he has bright amber eyes. The moment I see him, I know that he's one of the people responsible for this. I know that he must live in the wilds. I know he's an invalid. Fear clamps down on my stomach, and I open my mouth to shout something, I'm not sure what exactly, but at precisely that second he gives a minute shake of his head, and suddenly I can't make a sound. Then he does the absolutely, positively unthinkable. He winks at me. At last the alarm goes off. It's so loud I have to cover my ears with my hands. I look down to see whether the evaluators have seen him, but they're still doing their little tabletop dance, and when I look up again, he's gone. Chapter 5. Step on a crack, you'll break your mama's back. Step on a stone, you'll end up all alone. Step on a stick, you're bound to get the sick. Watch where you tread, you'll bring out all the dead. A common children's playground chant, usually accompanied by jumping rope or clapping. That night, I have the dream again. I'm at the edge of a big white cliff made out of sand. The ground is unsteady. The ledge I'm standing on is starting to crumble, to flake away and tumble down thousands of feet below me, into the ocean, which is whipping and snapping so hard it looks like one gigantic frothing stew, all white caps and surging water. I'm terrified I'm going to fall, but for some reason I can't move or back away from the edge of the cliff. Even as I feel the ground sifting away from underneath me, millions of molecules rearranging themselves into space, into wind, any second I'm going to fall. And just before I know that there's nothing underneath me but air, that at any split second I'm going to feel the wind shrieking around me as I drop down into the water, the waves lashing underneath me open up for a moment, and I see my mother's face, pale and bloated and splotched with blue, floating just below the surface. Her eyes are open, her mouth is split apart as though she is screaming, her arms are extended on either side of her, bobbing in the current, as though she is waiting to embrace me. That's when I wake up. That's when I always wake up. My pillow is damp, and I've got a scratchy feeling in my throat. I've been crying in my sleep. Gracie is folded next to me, one cheek squashed flat against the sheets, her mouth making endless, noiseless repetitions. She always gets into bed with me when I'm having the dream. She can sense it, somehow. I brush her hair away from her face and pull the sweat-soaked sheets away from her shoulders. I'll be sorry to leave Grace when I move out. Our secrets have made us close, bonded us together. She is the only one who knows of the coldness, a feeling that comes sometimes when I'm lying in bed, a black, empty feeling that knocks my breath away and leaves me gasping as though I've just been thrown in icy water. On nights like that, although it is wrong and illegal, I think of those strange and terrible words, I love you, and wonder what they would taste like in my mouth, try to recall their lilting rhythm on my mother's tongue. And of course I keep her secret safe. I'm the only one who knows that Grace isn't stupid, or slow, there's nothing wrong with her at all. I'm the only one who has ever heard her speak. One night after she'd come to sleep in my bed, I woke up in the very early morning, the nighttime shadows ebbing off our walls. She was sobbing quietly into the pillow next to me, pronouncing the same word over and over, stuffing her mouth with blankets so I could barely hear her, mommy, mommy, mommy. As though she was trying to chew her way around it. As though it was choking her in her sleep. I'd put my arms around her and squeezed, and after what felt like hours she exhausted herself on the word and fell back to sleep, the tension in her body slowly relaxing, her face hot and bloated from the tears. That's the real reason she doesn't speak. All the rest of her words are crowded out by that single, looming one, a word still echoing in the dark corners of her memory. Mommy. I know. I remember. I sit up and watch the light strengthen on the walls, listen for the sounds of the seagulls outside, take a drink from the glass of water next to my bed. Today is June 2nd. 94 days. I wish for Grace, the cure could come sooner. I comfort myself by thinking that someday she will have the procedure too. Someday she will be saved and the past and all its pain will be rendered as smoothly palatable as the food we spoon to our babies. Someday we will all be saved. By the time I drag myself down to breakfast feeling as though someone is grinding sand into both of my eyes, the official story about the incident at the labs has been released. Carol keeps our small TV on low while she makes breakfast, and the murmur of the newscasters' voices almost puts me back to sleep. Yesterday, a truck full of cattle intended for the slaughterhouse was mixed up with a shipment of pharmaceuticals, resulting in the hilarious and unprecedented chaos you see on your screen. Cue nurses squealing, swatting at lowing cows with clipboards. This doesn't make any sense, but as long as no one mentions the invalids, everyone's happy. We're not supposed to know about them. They're not even supposed to exist. Supposedly, all the people who live in the wilds were destroyed over 50 years ago, during the Blitz. 50 years ago, the government closed the borders of the United States. The border is guarded constantly by military personnel. No one can get in. No one goes out. Every sanctioned and approved community must also be contained within a border. That's the law, and all travel between communities requires official written consent of the municipal government to be obtained 6 months in advance. This is for our own protection. Safety, sanctity, community, that is our country's motto. For the most part, the government has been successful. We haven't seen a war since the border was closed, and there is hardly any crime, except for the occasional incident of vandalism or petty theft. There is no more hatred in the United States, at least among the cured. Only sporadic cases of detachment, but every medical procedure carries a certain risk. But so far, the government has failed to rid the country of the invalids, and it is the single blemish on the administration and the system in general. So we don't talk about them. We pretend that the wilds and the people who live there don't even exist. It's rare to hear the word even spoken, except when a suspected sympathizer disappears, or when a young diseased couple is found to have vanished together before a cure can be administered. One piece of really good news is this: all of yesterday's evaluations have been invalidated. All of us will receive a new evaluation date, which means I get a second chance. This time I swear I'm not going to screw it up. I feel completely idiotic about my meltdown at the labs. Sitting at the breakfast table, with everything looking so clean and bright and normal, the chipped blue mugs full of coffee, the erratic beeping of the microwave, one of the few electronic devices, besides the lights Carol actually allows us to use, makes yesterday seem like a long, strange dream. It's a miracle, actually, that a bunch of fanatical invalids decided to let loose a stampede at the exact moment I was failing the most important test of my life. I don't know what came over me. I think about Glasses showing his teeth, and the moment I heard my mouth say, "Gray," and I wince. Stupid, stupid. Suddenly I'm aware that Jenny has been talking to me. What? I blink at Jenny as she swims into focus. I watch her hands as she cuts her toast precisely into quarters. I said, "What's wrong with you?" Back and forth, back and forth. The knife dings against the edge of the plate. "You look like you're about to puke or something." Jenny, Carol scolds. She is at the sink, washing dishes. "Not while your uncle is eating breakfast." "I'm fine." I rip off a piece of toast, slide it across the stick of butter that's getting melty in the middle of the table, and force myself to eat. The last thing I need is a good old family-style interrogation. "Just tired." Carol turns to look at me. Her face has always reminded me of a doll's. Even when she's talking, even when she's irritated or happy or confused, her expression stays weirdly immobile. "Couldn't sleep." "I slept," I say. "I just had a bad dream, that's all." At the end of the table, my Uncle William starts up from his newspaper. "Oh, God. You know what? You just reminded me. I had a dream last night too." Carol raises her eyebrows, and even Jenny looks interested. It's extremely unusual for people to dream once they've been cured. Carol once told me that on the rare occasion she still dreams, her dreams are full of dishes, stacks and stacks of them climbing toward the sky, and sometimes she climbs them, lip to lip, hauling herself up into the clouds trying to reach the top of the stack. But it never ends. It stretches on into infinity. As far as I know, my sister Rachel never dreams anymore. William smiles. I was caulking the window in the bathroom. "Carol, you remember I said there was a draft the other day?" Anyway, I was piping in the caulk, but every time I finished it would just flake away almost like it was snow, and the wind would come in and I'd have to start all over. On and on for hours, it felt like. "How strange," my aunt says, smiling, coming to the table with a plate of fried eggs. My uncle likes them super runny, and they sit on the plate, their yolks jiggling and quivering like hula hoop dancers, spotted with oil. My stomach twists. William says, "No wonder I'm so tired this morning. I was doing housework all night." Everyone laughs but me. I choke down another bit of toast, wondering whether I'll dream once I've been cured. I hope not. This year is the first year since 6th grade that I don't have a single class with Hannah, so I don't see her until after school when we meet up in the locker room to go running, even though cross-country season ended a couple of weeks ago. When the team went to regionals, it was only the third time I'd ever been out of Portland, and even though we went just 40 miles along the gray, bleak municipal highway, I could still hardly swallow. The butterflies in my throat were so frantic. Still, Hannah and I try to run together as much as we can, even during school vacations. I started running when I was 6 years old, after my mom committed suicide. The first day I ever ran a whole mile was the day of her funeral. I'd been told to stay upstairs with my cousins while my aunt prepared the house for the memorial service and laid out all the food. Marcia and Rachel were supposed to get me ready, but in the middle of helping me dress they'd started arguing about something, and had stopped paying me any attention at all. So I had wandered downstairs, my dress zipped halfway up my back, to ask my aunt for help. Mrs. Eisner, my aunt's neighbor at the time, was there. As I came into the kitchen she was saying, "It's horrible, of course. But there was no hope for her anyway. It's much better this way. It's better for Lena too. Who wants a mother like that? I wasn't supposed to have heard. Mrs. Eisner gave a startled little gasp when she saw me, and her mouth shut quickly, like a cork popping back into a bottle. My aunt just stood there, and in that second it was as though the world and the future collapsed down into a single point, and I understood that the kitchen, the spotless cream linoleum floors, the glaring lights, and the vivid green mass of Jell-O on the counter was all that was left now that my mother was gone. Suddenly I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stand the sight of my aunt's kitchen, which I now understood would be my kitchen. I couldn't stand the Jell-O. My mother hated Jell-O. An itchy feeling began to work its way through my body, as though 1,000 mosquitoes were circulating through my blood, biting me from the inside, making me want to scream, jump, squirm. I ran. Hannah, 1 foot on a bench, is lacing up her shoes when I come in. My awful secret is that I like to run with Hannah, partly because it's the single, solitary shred of a thing that I can do better than she can, but I would never admit that out loud in a million years. I haven't even had a chance to put my bag down before she's leaning forward and grabbing my arm. Can you believe it? She's fighting a smile, and her eyes are a pinwheel of color blue-green, gold flashing like they always do when she's excited about something. It was definitely the invalids. That's what everybody's saying anyway. We're the only people in the locker room. All the sports teams have finished their seasons, but I instinctively whip my head around when she says the word. Keep your voice down. She pulls back a little, tossing her hair over one shoulder. Relax. I did recon. Even checked the toilet stalls. We're in the clear. I open up the gym locker I've had for all my 10 years at Street. Ann's. At its bottom is a film of gum wrappers and shredded notes and lost paper clips, and on top of that, my small limp pile of running clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, my cross-country team jersey, a dozen half-used bottles of deodorant, conditioner, and perfume. In less than 2 weeks I'll graduate and never see the inside of this locker again, and for a second I get sad. It's gross, but I've actually always loved the smell of gyms, the industrial cleaning fluid, and the deodorant and soccer balls, and even the lingering smell of sweat. It's comforting to me. It's so strange how life works. You want something and you wait and feel like it's taking forever to come. Then it happens and it's over, and all you want to do is curl back up in that moment before things changed. Who's everybody anyway? The news is saying it was just a mistake, a shipping error or something. I feel the need to repeat the official story, even though I know just as well as Hannah that it's BS. She straddles the bench, watching me. As usual, she's oblivious to the fact that I hate it when other people see me change. Don't be an idiot. If it was on the news, it definitely isn't true. Besides, who mixes up a cow and a box of prescription meds? It's not like it's hard to tell the difference. I shrug. She's right, obviously. She's still looking at me, so I angle slightly away. I've never been comfortable with my body like Hannah and some of the other girls at Street. Ann's never gotten over the awkward feeling that I've been fitted together just a little wrong in some very key places. Like I've been sketched by an amateur artist. If you don't look too closely, it's all right, but start focusing and all the smudges and mistakes become really obvious. Hannah kicks one leg out and begins stretching, refusing to let the issue drop. Hannah's more fascinated with the wilds than anyone I've ever met. If you think about it, it's pretty amazing. The planning and all that. It would have taken at least 4 or 5 people, maybe more, to coordinate everything. I think briefly of the boy I saw on the observation deck, of his flashing, autumn leaf-colored hair, and the way he tipped his head back when he laughed so I could see the vaulted black arch of his mouth. I told no one about him, not even Hannah, and now I feel I should have. Hannah goes on, someone must have had security codes. Maybe a sympathizer. A door bangs loudly at the front of the locker room, and Hannah and I both jump, staring at each other with wide eyes. Footsteps click quickly across the linoleum. After a few seconds of hesitation, Hannah launches smoothly into a safe topic, the color of the graduation gowns, which are orange this year. Just then Mrs. Johansson, the athletic director, comes around the bank of lockers, swinging her whistle around one finger. At least they're not brown, like at Fielston Prep, I say, though I'm barely listening to Hannah. My heart is pounding and I'm still thinking about the boy and wondering whether Johansson heard us say the word sympathizer. She doesn't do anything but nod as she passes us, so it seems unlikely. I've learned to get really good at this. Say one thing when I'm thinking about something else, act like I'm listening when I'm not, pretend to be calm and happy when really I'm freaking out. It's one of the skills you perfect as you get older. You have to learn that people are always listening. The first time I ever used the cell phone that my aunt and uncle share, I was surprised by the patchy interference that kept breaking up my conversation with Hannah at random intervals, until my aunt explained that it was just the government's listening devices, which arbitrarily cut into cell phone calls, recording them, monitoring conversations for target words like love, or invalids, or sympathizer. No one in particular is targeted. It's all done randomly, to be fair. But it's almost worse that way. I pretty much always feel as though a giant, revolving gaze is bound to sweep over me at any second, lighting up my bad thoughts like an animal lit still and white in the ever-turning beam of a lighthouse. Sometimes I feel as though there are two me's, one coasting directly on top of the other, the superficial me who nods when she's supposed to nod and says what she's supposed to say, and some other deeper part, the part that worries and dreams and says gray. Most of the time they move along in sync and I hardly notice the split, but sometimes it feels as though I'm two whole different people and I could rip apart at any second. Once I confessed this to Rachel. She just smiled and told me it would all be better after the procedure. After the procedure, she said it would be all coasting, all glide every day as easy as 1, 2, 3. Ready, I say, spinning my locker closed. We can still hear Mrs. Johansson shuffling around in the bathroom, whistling. A toilet flushes. A faucet goes on. My turn to pick the root, Hannah says, eyes sparkling, and before I can open my mouth to protest, she lunges forward and smacks me on the shoulder. Tag. You're it, she says, and just as easily spins off the bench and sprints for the door laughing, so I have to run to catch up. Earlier in the day it rained, and the storm cooled everything off. Water evaporates from puddles in the streets, leaving a shimmering layer of mist over Portland. Above us the sky is now a vivid blue. The bay is flat and silver, the coast like a giant belt cinched around it, keeping it in place. I don't ask Hannah where she's going, but it doesn't surprise me when she starts winding us toward Old Port, toward the old footpath that runs along Commercial Street and up to the labs. We try to keep on the smaller, less traffic streets, but it's pretty much a losing game. It's 3:30. All the schools have been released, and the streets surge with students walking home. A few buses rumble past, and 1 or 2 cars squeeze by. Cars are considered good luck. As they pass, people reach out their hands and brush along the shiny hoods, the clean, bright windows, which will soon be smudged with fingerprints. Hannah and I run next to each other, reviewing all the day's gossip. We don't talk about the botched evaluations yesterday, or the rumors of the invalids. There are too many people around. Instead she tells me about her ethics exam, and I tell her about Cora Dervish's fight with Minna Wilkinson. We talk about Willow Marks too, who has been absent from school since the previous Wednesday. Rumor is that Willow was found by regulators last week in Deering Oaks Park after curfew with a boy. We've been hearing rumors like that about Willow for years. She's just the kind of person people talk about. She has blonde hair, but she's always coloring different streaks into it with markers, and I remember once on a freshman class trip to a museum, we passed a group of Spencer Prep boys and she said, so loud one of our chaperones could have easily heard, I'd like to kiss one of them straight on the lips. Supposedly she was caught hanging out with a boy in 10th grade and got off with a warning because she showed no signs of the deliria. Every so often people make mistakes. It's biological, a result of the same kind of chemical and hormonal imbalances that occasionally lead to unnaturalism, to boys being attracted to boys and girls to girls. These impulses too will be resolved by the cure. But this time it is serious apparently, and Hannah drops the bomb just as we turn on to center. Mr. and Mrs. Marks have agreed to move the date of Willow's procedure up by a full 6 months. She'll be missing graduation day to get cured. 6 months. I repeat. We've been running hard for 20 minutes, so I'm not sure if the heavy thumping in my chest is a result of the exercise or the news. I'm feeling more out of breath than I should be, like someone sitting on my chest. Isn't that dangerous? Hannah tips her head to the right, gesturing the way to a shortcut through an alley. It's been done before. Yeah, but not successfully. What about all the side effects? Mental problems. Blindness. There are a few reasons why the scientists won't let anyone under the age of 18 have the procedure, but the biggest one is that it just doesn't seem to work as well for people younger than that, and in the worst cases it's been known to cause all kind of crazy problems. Scientists speculate that the brain and its neural pathways are still too plastic, before then still in the middle of forming themselves. Actually, the older you are when you have the procedure the better, but most people are scheduled for the procedure as close as possible to their 18th birthday. I guess they think it's worth the risk, Hannah says. Better than the alternative, you know. Amor deliria nervosa. The deadliest of all deadly things. This is the catchphrase that's written on every mental health pamphlet ever written about the deliria. Hannah's voice is flat as she repeats it, and it makes my stomach dip. All of yesterday's craziness has made me forget Hannah's comment to me before the evaluations. But now I remember, and remember how strange she looked too, eyes cloudy and unreadable. Come on. I feel a straining in my lungs and my left thigh is starting to cramp. The only way to push through it is to run harder and faster. Let's pick it up, slug. Bring it. Hannah's face splits into a grin, and both of us start pumping faster. The pain in my lungs swells up and blossoms until it feels like it's everywhere, tearing through all my cells and muscles at once. The cramp in my leg makes me wince every time my heel hits the pavement. It's always like this on miles 2 and 3, Like all the stress and anxiety and irritation and fear get transformed into little needling points of physical pain, and you can't breathe or imagine going farther or think anything but, I can't. I can't. I can't. And then just as suddenly, it's gone. All the pain lifts away, the cramp vanishes, the fist eases off my chest, and I can breathe easily. Instantly a feeling of total happiness bubbles up inside of me, the solid feeling of the ground underneath me, the simplicity of the movement rocketing off my heels pushing forward in time and space, total freedom and release. I glance over at Hannah. I can tell from her expression that she's feeling it too. She has made it through the wall. She senses me looking, and whips around her blonde ponytail a bright arc, to give me the thumbs up. It's strange. When we run I feel closer to Hannah than at any other time. Even when we're not talking, it's like there's an invisible cord tethering us together, matching our rhythms, our arms and our legs, as though we're both responding to the same drumbeat. More and more it has been occurring to me that this too will change after our procedures. She'll retreat to the West End and make friends with her neighbors, with people richer and more sophisticated than I am. I'll stay in some crappy apartment on Cumberland, and I won't miss her, or remember what it felt like to run side by side. They've warned me that after my procedure I may not even like running anymore, period. Another side effect of the cure, people often change their habits afterward, lose interest in their former hobbies and things that had given them pleasure. The cured incapable of strong desire are thus rid of both remembered and future pain after the procedure. The Safety, Health and Happiness Handbook, p. 132. The world is spinning by, people and streets a long, unfurling ribbon of color and sound. We run past Street Vincent's, the biggest all-boys school in Portland. A half-dozen boys are outside playing basketball, lazily dribbling the ball around, calling to one another. Their words are a blur, an indistinct series of shouts and barks and short bursts of laughter, the way that boys always sound whenever they're together in groups, whenever you only hear them from around corners or across streets or down the beach. It's like they have a language all their own, and for about the 1000th time I think how glad I am that segregation policies keep us separate most of the time. As we run by I think I sense a momentary pause, a fraction of a second, when all their eyes lift and turn in our direction. I'm too embarrassed to look. My whole body goes white hot, like someone's just stuck me headfirst into an oven. But a second later I feel their eyes sweeping past me, a wind latching onto Hannah. Her blonde hair flashes next to me, a coin in the sun. The pain is creeping back into my legs, a leaden feeling, but I force myself to keep going as we round the corner of Commercial Street and Leaf Street. Vincent's behind. I feel Hannah straining to keep up next to me. I turn my head, barely managing to gasp out, "Race you." But as Hannah pulls up, arms pumping, and nearly passes me, I put my head down and lunge forward, cycling my legs as fast as I can, trying to suck air into my lungs, which feel like they've shrunk to the size of a pea, fighting the screaming in my muscles. Blackness eats the edges of my vision, and all I can see is the chain link fence that rises up in front of us, suddenly blocking our path, and then I'm reaching out and whacking it so hard it begins to shake, turning around to yell, "I won." As Hannah pulls up a second behind me, gasping for breath. Both of us are laughing now, hiccuping and taking huge gulping breaths of air as we pace around in circles trying to walk it off. When she can finally breathe again, Hannah straightens up, laughing. "I let you win," she says, an old joke of ours. I tow some gravel in her direction. She ducks away, shrieking. "Keep telling yourself that." My hair has come out of its ponytail and I wrestle it out of its elastic, flipping my head down so I get the wind on my neck. Sweat drips down into my eyes, stinging. "Nice look." Hannah pushes me lightly and I stumble sideways, whipping my head up to swipe back at her. She sidesteps me. There's a gap in the chain link fence that marks the beginning of a narrow service road. This is blocked with a low metal gate. Hannah hops it and gestures for me to follow. I haven't really been paying attention to where we are. The service drive threads down through a parking lot, a forest of industrial dumpsters and cargo storage sheds. Beyond those is the familiar string of white square buildings, like giant teeth. This must be one of the side entrances of the lab complex. I see now that the chain link fence is looped on top with barbed wire and marked at 20-foot intervals with signs that all read, "Private property. No trespassing. Authorized personnel only." "I don't think we're supposed to," I start to say, but Hannah cuts me off. "Come on," she calls out. "Live a little." I do a quick scan of the parking lot beyond the gate and the road behind us, no one. The small guard hut just past the gate is also empty. I lean over and peek inside. There's a half-eaten sandwich sitting on wax paper and a stack of books piled messily on a small desk next to an old-fashioned radio which is spitting static and patchy bits of music into the silence. I don't see any surveillance cameras either, though there must be some. All the government buildings are wired. I hesitate for a second longer, then swing myself over the gate and catch up to Hannah. Her eyes are lit up with excitement, and I can tell that this was her plan and her destination all along. This must be how the invalids got in, she says in a breathless rush, as though we've been talking about yesterday's drama at the labs all this time. Don't you think? Doesn't seem like it would have been hard. I'm trying to sound casual, but the whole thing, the empty service road, and the enormous parking lot shimmering in the sun, the blue dumpsters and the electrical wires zigzagging across the sky, the sparkling white slope of the lab roofs makes me uneasy. Everything is silent and very still, frozen, almost the way things are in a dream, or just before a major thunderstorm. I don't want to say it to Hannah, but I'd give pretty much anything to head back to Old Port, to the complex nest of familiar streets and stores. Even though there's no one around, I have the impression of being watched. It's worse than the normal feeling of being observed in school and on the street and even at home, having to be cautious about what you do and say, the closed, blocked-in feeling that everyone gets used to eventually. Yeah. Hannah kicks at the packed dirt road. A plume of dust puffs up, resettles slowly. Pretty crappy security for a major medical facility. Pretty crappy security for a petting zoo, I say. I resent that. The voice comes from behind us, and both Hannah and I jump. I spin around. The world seems to freeze for an instant. A boy is standing behind us, arms crossed, head cocked to the side. A boy with caramel-colored skin and hair that's a golden brown color, like autumn leaves getting ready to fall. It's him. The boy from yesterday, from the observation deck. The invalid. Except he isn't an invalid, obviously. He's wearing a short-sleeved blue guard's uniform over jeans, and he's got a laminated government ID clipped to his collar. I leave for 2 seconds to get a refill. He gestures to the bottle of water he's holding, and I come back to find a full-fledged break-in. I'm so confused I can't move, or speak, or do anything. Hannah must think I'm scared, because she jumps in quickly. We weren't breaking in. We weren't doing anything. We were just running, and we got lost. The boy crosses his arms in front of his chest, rocking back on his heels. Didn't see any of the signs outside, huh? No trespassing. Authorized personnel only. Hannah looks away. She's nervous too. I can feel it. Hannah's 1,000 times more confident than I am, but neither of us is used to standing in the open and talking to a boy, especially not a boy guard, and it must have occurred to Hannah that he already has plenty of grounds to arrest us. Must have missed them, she mumbles. Uh-huh. He raises his eyebrows. It's obvious he doesn't believe us, but at least he doesn't look angry. They're pretty subtle. Only a few dozen of them. I can see how you might not have noticed. He looks away for a second, squinting, and I get the feeling he's trying to stop himself from laughing. He's not like any guard I've ever seen, at least, not the typical guards you see at the border and all around Portland, fat and scowly and old. I think about how sure I was yesterday that he came from the wilds, the solid certainty deep inside of me. I was wrong, obviously. As he turns his head, I see the unmistakable sign of someone who is cured, the mark of the procedure, a 3-pointed scar just behind the left ear, where the scientists insert a special 3-pronged needle used exclusively for immobilizing the patient so that the cure can be administered. People show off their scars like badges of honor. You hardly see any cureds with long hair, and the women who haven't lopped off their hair entirely are careful to wear it pulled back. My fear recedes. Talking to a cured isn't illegal. The rules of segregation don't apply. I'm not sure if he has recognized me or not. If so, he hasn't given any sign of it. Finally, I can't take it anymore and I burst out, "You. I saw you at the last second." I can't finish the sentence. I saw you yesterday. You winked at me. Hannah looks startled. You two know each other. She shoots a look at me. Hannah knows I've hardly ever exchanged 2 words with a boy before, unless it's "excuse me" in the street or "sorry for stepping on your toes" when I trip on somebody. We're not supposed to have more than minimal contact with uncured boys outside of our own families. Even after they've been cured, there's hardly a need or excuse for it, unless we're dealing with a doctor or teacher or someone like that. He turns to look at me. His face is completely professional and composed, but I swear I see something flickering in his eyes, a look of amusement or pleasure. "No," he says smoothly. "We've never met." I'm sure I would remember. The flash in his eyes is back. Is he laughing at me? "I'm Hannah," Hannah says. "And this is Lena." She jabs me with an elbow. I know I must look like a fish, standing there with my mouth gaping open, but I'm too outraged to speak. He's lying. I know he's the one I saw yesterday, would bet my life on it. "Alex. Nice to meet you." Alex keeps his eyes on me as he and Hannah shake hands. Then he extends a hand to me. "Lena," he says thoughtfully. I've never heard that name before. I hesitate. Shaking hands makes me feel awkward, like I'm playing dress up in an adult's too big clothing. Besides, I've never actually touched skin to skin with a stranger. But he's just standing there with his hand out, so after a second I reach out and shake. The moment we touch, a tiny electrical shock buzzes through me, and I pull away quickly. It's short for Magdalena, I say. Magdalena. Alex tips his head back, watching me from narrowed eyes. Pretty. I'm momentarily distracted by the way he says my name. In his mouth it sounds musical, not clunky and angular, the way my teachers have always made it sound. His eyes are a warm amber color, and as I look at him I have a sudden, flashing memory of my mother pouring syrup over a stack of pancakes. I look away, feeling ashamed, as though he has somehow been responsible for dredging the memory up, has reached in with his hand and wrenched it from me. Embarrassment makes me feel angry, and I press on. I do know you. I saw you yesterday in the labs. You were on the observation deck, watching everything. Again, my courage fails me at the last second, and I don't say watching me. I can feel Hannah glaring at me, but I ignore her. She must be furious I haven't told her any of this. Alex's face doesn't change. He doesn't blink or drop his smile for even a fraction of a second. Case of mistaken identity, I guess. Guards aren't allowed in the labs during evaluations. Especially not part-time guards. For a second longer we stand there, staring at each other. Now I know he's lying, and the easy, lazy grin on his face makes me want to reach out and slap him. I ball my fists and suck in a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. I'm not the violent type. I don't know why I'm feeling so aggravated. Hannah jumps in, breaking the tension. So this is it. A part-time security guard and some keep-out signs. Alex keeps his eyes on me a half-second longer. Then he turns to look at Hannah as though noticing her for the first time. What do you mean? I would have thought the labs would be better protected, that's all. It doesn't seem like it would be too hard to break into this place. Alex raises his eyebrows. Thinking about making the attempt. Hannah freezes, and my blood goes to ice. She has gone too far. If Alex reports us as potential sympathizers, or troublemakers, or anything, we're in for months and months of surveillance and investigation, and we can kiss our chances of passing the evaluations with decent scores goodbye. I picture a lifetime of watching Andrew Marcus fish snot out of his nose with a thumbnail, and feel queasy. Alex must sense our fear, because he raises both hands. Relax. I was kidding. You don't exactly seem like terrorists. It occurs to me how ridiculous we must look in our running shorts and sweaty tank tops and neon sneakers. Or at least, I must look ridiculous. Hannah looks like a model for athletic wear. Again, I feel a fit of blushing coming on, followed by a surge of irritation. No wonder the regulators decided on the segregation of boys and girls, otherwise, it would have been a nightmare, this feeling angry and self-conscious and confused and annoyed all the time. This is just the loading area, anyway, for freight and stuff. Alex gestures beyond the line of cargo sheds. Real security starts closer to the facilities. Full-time guards, cameras, electrified fence, the whole shebang. Hannah doesn't look at me, but when she speaks I can hear the excitement creeping into her voice. The loading area. Like, where the deliveries come. In my head I start praying, don't say anything dumb. Don't say anything dumb. Do not mention the invalids. You got it. Hannah dances on her feet, shifting her weight back and forth. I try to shoot her a warning look, but she avoids my eyes. So this is where the trucks come. With medical equipment and other stuff. Exactly. Again I have the impression of something flickering behind Alex's eyes, even as the rest of his face stays totally neutral. I don't trust him, I realize, and again wonder why he is lying about being in the labs yesterday. Maybe only because it's forbidden, like he said. Maybe because he was laughing instead of trying to help out. And maybe, after all, he really doesn't recognize me. We made eye contact for only a few seconds, and I'm sure to him I was only a blurry, in-between face, easy to forget. Not pretty. Not ugly either. Just plain, like 1,000 other faces you would see on the street. He, on the other hand, is most definitely not in between. There's something insane to me about standing in the open talking to a strange boy, even if he is cured, and though my head is whirling, it's like my vision gets razor sharp, making everything look ultra detailed. I notice the way a piece of his hair curls around his scar, like a frame. I notice his large brown hands and the whiteness of his teeth and the perfect symmetry of his face. His jeans are faded and belted low on his hips, and the laces in his sneakers are the weirdest ink color blue, like he has colored them in with a pen. I wonder how old he is. He looks my age, but he must be slightly older, maybe 19. I wonder, to a brief, flitting thought, whether he's already been paired. But of course he has. He must have been. I've been staring at him accidentally, and he turns suddenly to look at me. I drop my eyes, feeling a quick and irrational terror that he has managed to read my thoughts. I'd love to look around, Hannah hints not so subtly. I reach out and pinch her when Alex isn't looking, and she shrinks away, giving me a guilty look. At least she doesn't start grilling him about what happened yesterday, and get us thrown in jail, or dragged through an interrogation. Alex tosses his water bottle in the air, catches it in one hand. Trust me, there's nothing to see. Unless you're a fan of industrial waste. There's plenty of that around here. He tips his head toward the dumpsters. Oh, and the best view of the bay in Portland. We've got that going for us too. Really? Hannah wrinkles her nose, momentarily distracted from her detective mission. Alex nods, tosses the bottle again, catches it. As it arcs through the air, the sun winks through the water like light from a jewel. That I can show you, he says. Come on. All I want is to get out of here, but Hannah says sure, so I trudge along after her, silently cursing her curiosity and fixation with all things invalid-related and vowing never to let her pick our running route again. She and Alex walk in front, and I pick up scattered bits of their conversation. I hear him say he takes classes at one of the colleges but miss what he says he studies. Hannah tells him we're about to graduate. He tells her he's 19. She says that we're both turning 18 in several months. Thankfully, they avoid talking about the botched evaluations yesterday. The service road connects with another smaller drive, which runs parallel to 4 streets slanting steeply uphill toward the eastern promenade. Here there are rows of long, metal storage sheds. The sun is flat and high and unrelenting. I'm incredibly thirsty, but when Alex turns around and offers me a sip from his water bottle, I say, no, quickly and too loud. The thought of putting my mouth where his mouth has been makes me feel anxious all over again. As we come up to the top of the hill, all 3 of us panting a little from the climb, the bay unfolds to our right like a gigantic map, a sparkling, shimmering world of blues and greens. Hannah gasps a little. It really is a beautiful view, unobstructed and perfect. The sky is full of poofy white clouds that make me think of feather pillows, and seagulls turn lazy arcs over the water, patterns of birds forming and dissolving in the sky. Hannah walks forward a few feet. It's amazing. Gorgeous, isn't it? No matter how long I live here, I never get used to it. She turns and looks at me. I think this is my favorite way to see the ocean. Middle of the afternoon, sunny and bright. It's just like a photograph. Don't you think, Lena? I'm feeling so relaxed, enjoying the wind at the top of the hill, which sweeps over my arms and legs and makes me feel cool and delicious, enjoying the view of the bay and the high, blinking eye of the sun. I've almost forgotten that Alex is with us. He's been hanging back, standing a few feet behind us, and ever since we came up the hill he hasn't said a word. Which is why I nearly jump out of my skin when he leans forward and directs a single word into my ear. Gray. What? I whirl around, my heart pounding. Hannah has turned back to the water and is going on about wishing she had her camera, and how you never seem to have anything you really need. Alex is bent close to me, so close I can see his individual eyelashes, like perfect brushstrokes on a canvas portrait, and now his eyes are literally dancing with light, burning as though on fire. What did you say? I repeat. My voice comes out a croaky whisper. He leans another inch closer, and it's like the flames seep out of his eyes and light my whole body on fire. I've never been this close to a boy before. I feel like fainting and running all at the same time. But I can't move. I said, I prefer the ocean when it's gray. Or not really gray. A pale, in-between color. It reminds me of waiting for something good to happen. He does remember. He was there. The ground seems to be dissolving under my feet the way it does in the dream about my mother. All I can see are his eyes, the shifting pattern of shadow and light turning there. You lied, I managed to croak out. Why did you lie? He doesn't answer me. He pulls away a few inches and says, of course it's even prettier at sunset. Around 8:30 the sky looks like it's on fire, especially at Back Cove. You should really see it. He pauses, and though his voice is low and casual, I get the feeling he's trying to tell me something important. Tonight it will probably be amazing. My brain grinds into action, slowly processing his words the way he's emphasizing certain details. Then it clicks, he has given me a time and a place. He's telling me to meet him. Are you asking me to? I start to say, but just then Hannah runs back up to me, grabbing my arm. God, she says, laughing. Can you believe it's after 5 already? We've got to go. She's dragging me backward before I can respond or protest, and by the time I think to look over my shoulder to see if Alex is watching or giving me any kind of sign, he has disappeared from view. Chapter 6. Mama, help me get home. I'm out in the woods, I am out on my own. I found me a werewolf, a nasty old mutt. It showed me its teeth and went straight for my gut. Mama, help me get home. I'm out in the woods, I am out on my own. I was stopped by a vampire, a rotting old wreck. It showed me its teeth and went straight for my neck. Mama, put me to bed. I won't make it home, I'm already half dead. I met an invalid and fell for his art. He showed me his smile and went straight for my heart. From A Child's Walk Home, Nursery Rhymes and Folk Tales, edited by Corey Levinson. That evening I can't concentrate. When I'm setting the table for dinner, I accidentally pour wine in Gracie's juice cup and orange juice in my uncle's wine glass, and while I'm grating cheese I catch my knuckles so many times in the teeth of the grater my aunt finally sends me out of the kitchen saying she'd prefer not to have a topping of skin for her ravioli. I can't stop thinking about the last thing Alex said to me, the endlessly shifting pattern of his eyes, the strange expression on his face like he was inviting me. Around 8:30 the sky looks like it's on fire, especially at Back Cove. You should really see it. Is it even remotely, conceivably possible he was sending me a message? Is it possible he was asking me to meet him? The idea makes me dizzy. I keep thinking, too, about the single word directed low and quietly straight into my ear gray. He was there. He saw me. He remembered me. So many questions crowd my brain at once, it's like one of the famous Portland fogs has swept up from the ocean and settled there, making it impossible to think normal functional thoughts. My aunt finally notices something's wrong. Just before dinner I'm helping Jenny with her homework as always, testing her on her multiplication tables. We're sitting on the floor of the living room which is squashed up right next to the dining room, an alcove that barely holds a table and 6 chairs, and I'm holding her workbook on my knees reciting the problems to her, but my mind is on autopilot and my thoughts are a million miles away. Or rather, they're exactly 3.4 miles away, down at the marshy edge of Back Cove. I know the distance exactly because it's a nice run from my house. Now I'm calculating how quickly I could get down there on my bike, and then beating myself up for even considering the idea. 7 times 8. Jenny pinches her lips together. 56. 9 times 6. 52. On the other hand, there's no law that says you can't speak to a cured. Cureds are safe. They can be mentors or guides to the uncureds. Even though Alex is only a year older than I am, we're separated irreparably and totally by the procedure. He might as well be my grandfather. 7 times 11. 77. Lena. My aunt has squeezed out of the kitchen, past the dining room table, and is standing behind Jenny. I blink twice trying to focus. Carol's face is tight with concern. Is something the matter? No, I drop my eyes quickly. I hate it when my aunt looks at me like that, like she's reading all the bad parts from my soul. I feel guilty just for thinking about a boy, even a cured one. If she knew, she would say, "Oh Lena. Careful. Remember what happened to your mother." She would say, "These diseases tend to run in the blood." Why? I keep my eyes trained on the worn carpet underneath me. Carol bends forward, swoops up Jenny's workbook from my knees, and says loudly in her clear, high voice, 9 times 6 is 54. She snaps the workbook closed. Not 52, Lena. I assume you know your multiplication tables. Jenny sticks her tongue out at me. My cheeks start heating up as I realize my mistake. Sorry. I guess I'm just kind of distracted. There's a momentary pause. Carol's eyes never leave the back of my neck. I can sense them burning there. I feel like I'll scream or cry or confess if she keeps staring at me. Finally she sighs. You're still thinking about the evaluations, aren't you? I blow the air out of my cheeks, feel a weight of anxiety ease off my chest. Yeah. I guess so. I venture a glance up at her, and she smiles her little skittering smile. I know you're disappointed you have to go through the process again. But think about it this way, this time you'll be even more prepared. I bob my head and try to look enthusiastic, even though a little, pinching feeling of guilt starts nipping at me. I haven't even thought about the evaluations since this morning, not since I found out the results would be discounted. Yeah, you're right. Come on now. Dinner time. My aunt reaches out and passes a finger over my forehead. Her finger is cool and reassuring and gone as quickly as the lightest stirring of wind. It makes the guilt flare up full force, and in that moment I can't believe I was even considering going to Back Cove. It's the absolute 100% wrong thing to do, and I stand up for dinner feeling clean and weightless and happy, like the first time you feel healthy after a long fever. But at dinner my curiosity and with it, my doubts return. I can barely follow the conversation. All I can think is go. Don't go. Go. Don't go. At one point my uncle is telling a story about one of his customers and I notice everyone is laughing, so I laugh too, but a little too loud and long. Everyone turns to look at me, even Gracie, who puckers her nose and tilts her head like a dog sniffing at something new. Are you okay, Lena? My uncle asks, adjusting his glasses as though hoping to bring me into clearer focus. You seem a little strange. I'm fine. I push around some ravioli on my plate. Normally I can put away half a box myself, especially after a long run, and still have room for dessert, but I've barely managed to choke down a few bites. Just stressed. Leave her alone, my aunt says. She's upset about the evaluations. They didn't exactly turn out as planned. She lifts her eyes to my uncle, and they exchange a quick glance. I feel a rush of excitement. It's rare for my aunt and uncle to look at each other like that, a wordless glance full of meaning. Most of the time their interactions are limited to the usual thing. My uncle tells stories about work, my aunt tells stories about the neighbors. What's for dinner? There's a leak in the roof. Blah blah blah. I think that for once they're going to mention the Wilds and the invalids. But then my uncle gives a minute shake of his head. These kinds of mix-ups happen all the time, he says, staking a ravioli with his fork. Just the other day, I asked Andrew to reorder 3 cases of Vicks orange juice. But he goes and gets the codes wrong, and guess what shows up? 3 cases of baby formula. I said, Andrew. I tuned the conversation out again, grateful that my uncle is a talker and happy that my aunt has taken my side. The one good thing about being kind of shy is that nobody bugs you when you want to be left alone. I lean forward and sneak a glance at the clock in the kitchen. 7:30, and we haven't even finished eating. And afterward I'll have to help clear and wash the dishes, which always takes forever. The dishwasher uses up too much electricity, so we have to do them by hand. Outside, the sun is streaked with filaments of gold and pink. It looks like the candy that gets spun at the Sugar Shack downtown, all gloss and stretch and color. It will be a beautiful sunset tonight. In that moment the urge to go is so strong, I have to squeeze the sides of my chair to keep from suddenly springing up and running out the door. Finally I decide to stop stressing and leave it to luck, or fate, or whatever you want to call it. If we finish eating and I'm done cleaning up the dishes in time to make it to Back Cove, I'll go. If not, I'll stay. I feel a million times better once I've made the decision, and even managed to shovel down a few more bites of ravioli before Jenny, miracle of miracles, has a sudden late burst of speed and cleans her plate, and my aunt announces I can clear the dishes whenever I'm ready. I stand up and start stacking everyone's plates. It's almost 8 o'clock. Even if I can wash all the dishes in 15 minutes, and that's a stretch, it will still be difficult to get to the beach by 8:30. And forget about making it back by 9 o'clock, when the city has a mandated curfew for uncureds. And if I got caught on the streets after curfew? The truth is, I don't know what would happen. I've never broken curfew. Just as I've finally accepted that there's no way to get to Back Cove and back in time, my aunt does the unthinkable. As I'm reaching forward to take her plate, she stops me. You don't have to clean the dishes tonight, Lena. I'll do them. As she's speaking, she reaches out and puts a hand on my arm. Just like earlier, the touch is as fleeting and cool as wind. And before I can think about what this means, I'm blurting out, actually, I have to run to Hannah's house really quick. Now. A look of alarm or suspicion flickers across my aunt's face. It's nearly 8 o'clock. I know. She has a study guide she was supposed to give me. I just remembered. Now the look of suspicion, it is suspicion, definitely makes itself comfortable, drawing Carol's eyebrows together, cinching her lips. You don't have any of the same classes. And your boards are over. How important can it be? It's not for class. I roll my eyes, trying to conjure up Hannah's nonchalance, even though my palms are sweating and my heart is jerking around in my chest. It's like a guide full of pointers. For the evaluations. She knows I need to prep more, since I almost choked yesterday. Again, my aunt directs a small glance at my uncle. Curfew's in an hour, she says to me. If you get caught out after curfew. Nervousness makes my temper flare. I know about curfew, I snap. I've only been hearing about it for my whole life. I feel guilty the second that the words are out of my mouth, and I drop my eyes to avoid looking at Carol. I've never spoken back to her, have always tried to be as patient and obedient and good as possible, have always tried to be as invisible as possible. A nice girl who helps with the dishes and the little kids and does her homework and listens and keeps her head down. I know that I owe Carol for taking Rachel and me in after my mother died. If it wasn't for her, I'd probably be wasting away in one of the orphanages, uneducated, unnoticed, destined for a job at a slaughterhouse, probably cleaning up sheep guts or cow crap or something like that. Maybe. If I was lucky, I'd get to work for a cleaning service. No foster parent will adopt a child whose past has been tainted by the disease. I wish I could read her mind. I have no idea what she's thinking, but she seems to be analyzing me, attempting to read my face. I think I'm not doing anything wrong, it's harmless, I'm fine, over and over, and wipe my palms on the back of my jeans, positive I'm leaving a sweat mark. Be quick, she says finally, and as soon as the words are out of her mouth I'm off, jetting upstairs and switching my sandals for sneakers. Then I bang back down the stairs and fly out the door. My aunt has barely had time to take the dishes into the kitchen. She calls something to me as I blur past her, but I'm already pushing out the front door,